let's take a look at our first point video, since we don't use prompter here. Thank you, Uncle Jenk. This comes from one of my favorite conservatives on YouTube. This is Lee Doren. Take a look.
Hey everyone, my name is Lee Doren and I host the YouTube channel How the World Works. Now I could talk about the Supreme Court's decision on Obamacare for hours, but in this video I'm only going to focus on the short-term political implications of Justice Roberts' majority opinion on the individual mandate. Now if you're not familiar, the individual mandate forces individuals to purchase a private product, in this case health insurance, or pay a penalty. And Chief Justice Roberts wrote in the majority opinion that it is unconstitutional under the Commerce Clause, that it is unconstitutional under the Necessary and Proper Clause, and that it is constitutional as a tax. So what does that mean, and why is it important going towards November? Well, it means that Barack Obama violated his #1 campaign promise not to raise taxes on people making less than $250,000 a year, and any Democrats who support Obamacare also support raising taxes. In fact, arguably the largest tax increase in United States history. That can only help Republicans. So instead of Democrats simply getting a massive expansion of big government, many of them are going to be nailed as tax increasers this November, and Republicans may win many races as a result, and Barack Obama may also lose the presidency. And that's how the world works.
Hopefully, in a brave new world, we'll bring back pre-existing conditions for children. Now, thank you very much, Lee Doren. I do watch your videos all the time, and I again, really thank you for submitting that video, especially because you're not going to like the horrible things I say about you in 2 minutes. So I want to begin this with Rick.
Get there first.
No, and all due respect to Lee, but hang on. Rick, let me begin with you. Is Mr. Doren right? Is John Roberts so diabolically clever that he ruled in favor of Obama because he knew that by calling the mandate a tax, he would hand the presidency to Governor Romney, who did the same damn thing in Massachusetts?
You know what? He's clever, but I'm not sure he's that clever. I'll tell you what absolutely amazes me, and people are buying it, and that just disturbs me. This is like saying that despite the fact that 4 of the 9 justices actually said it wasn't a tax. They actually took some serious shots at John Roberts for calling it a tax and finding a way to make it constitutional that way. They think that Barack Obama had a crystal ball 2 years ago, and he said, you know what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen? They're going to find it constitutional by calling it a tax. I don't want anybody to know that, so I'm going to lie. I'm going to say it's a penalty, because he knew this was coming. How unbelievably stupid are these people?
Well, I think it's quite believable.
Pretty stupid.
Yeah, and again, it's not a tax.
You don't think that.
It's not a tax. There's a difference between a tax and a penalty. The bottom line is, and I think people, especially now, are arguing the vernacular of what it is and using that theoretically to make repercussions, to have theoretical repercussions. Because you know what? We're in such a fear state. We've been in a fear state for a number of years. For a couple of administrations, we've been in a fear state, and that fear says we don't know the particulars, and we'll let people in government discuss those particulars, and we'll sit there and we'll pretend that we know what we're talking about, but we want to know the ramifications and how it affects us. And until we know specifically, as an American people, individuals as well, we're going to be fear mongers about this.
In fairness, pretending you know what you talk about is how I make a living. But I want to go to Alexis on this, because
Don't we all?
What I find fascinating about this debate is that it wasn't a liberal health care plan. It was drafted by conservatives in the Heritage Foundation, pitched by conservatives. A conservative Governor Romney made it law in Massachusetts, and now conservatives are furious that this Democratic president made this conservative policy law. But isn't it the essence of conservatism, this so-called tax? It's a tax on freeloaders, if anything. It's the Republican ideal of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're not responsible. We're not going to pay for your health care costs when you uninsured guys go to the emergency room. Alexis, is it fair to characterize it that way?
I think so. And I think going back to a little bit what Lee was saying, I think short term, yes, this is a victory for the president. And, I think Republicans are trying to package this as the largest tax increase, but I think it kind of goes beyond that. I think it's a little bit too in the weeds. I mean, the talk about taxes, that was a footnote in the slip opinion. I mean, it's very detailed and not straightforward, but I think eventually what is going to be, I think, sort of the problem with this bill is that it's not, and you're right, we don't really know how this is going to play out because we haven't really done it on this scale, but I think what you're going to start seeing, and I think what the message should be for Republicans out there, is this isn't going to make it more affordable. We've seen premiums go up. Kaiser Health Foundation, which by no means is a conservative foundation, It's gone up 9% in the last 2 years already.
Only 1.5% of it, at worst estimates, attributable to the new law.
So I think instead of pushing for taxes, I think what's really going to hit people is when they start getting those notices in the mail saying your premiums are going up, which
well, and
we
that's the
don't really
question
know
is,
yet.
Any of you know
what's
how
gonna
much
happen.
the tax adds up to, by the way?
Please.
$27 billion over 10 years. That's the largest tax in history on the middle class.
And in fairness, in the state of Massachusetts,
$2.7 billion a year.
In the state of Massachusetts, this tax, this penalty, affected less than 1% of households.
Absolutely right. And by the way, that's
And
what
this
it's
is
going to
only
be
like,
nationally.
I do believe they were saying this was only affecting 6%.
Right.
Less, 1%.
However, I think
Oh, only
Justice
1%.
Justice Roberts did a really brilliant triangulation.
Yes, he did.
He knew he had to save his legacy. He couldn't have it be this hack right-wing court after Citizens United, Bush v. Gore, and he had to do something for the people. But he did put in this tax language, I thought, as some red meat to his base, try to keep himself on Grover Norquist's Christmas card list, if possible, and not completely alienate the folks who put him in power in the first place.
He did more than put in red meat. He actually brilliantly set the stage for his agenda for years to come.
Indeed.
This was amazing. I mean, not to get too into the weeds lawyer style, right? But this may have been the greatest political decision since Marbury v. Madison.
Politically,
where the Supreme Court, going back to our beginnings, basically set up the agenda that gave the Supreme Court the power they have. And then to make it all work, they let the other side win. That's exactly what's happened here.
And it's a very good point. Now, as far as Mr. Lee Doren, who I do thank again for submitting the video, I watch his stuff all the time, and I always enjoy watching his stuff because it's always like, okay, Lee Doren, you're a very smart conservative. You have your act together, you know what you're saying, and you're actually saying some challenging things that make sense, and you're making Democrats uncomfortable. That's good. And oh, you're kind of Ayn Randian, but I get the lot. Nope, you're full of shit. Every time I watch him, it always reaches, Lee Doren, you're full of shit, because he starts off really nice. Yeah, the tax business. Okay, it's not a tax under the Commerce Clause. That's true. That it's construed as a tax. Again, it was Obama's Solicitor General who said that, not the president. Violated his promise of no taxes on the middle class. I don't think I would call this a tax on the middle class, but the president did run against a mandate. He said making people buy health insurance to solve the problem is like making the homeless buy houses. So fair, and then he takes the one-way bus to Crazy Town. Sorry, but you did it on a monorail, Lee. Any Democrat who supports it supports taxes. Not true. This is a freeloader tax. Now, the taxes that are in the bill, if you go to PolitiFact out there, folks, you'll see exactly what the tax increases are. They're all to generate revenue. They're mostly on the wealthy. There's a 10% excise tax on indoor tanning services, so we know why Speaker Boehner's so upset. And that's an offense to all orange Americans. But generally speaking, these are taxes on an excise tax on manufacturers and importers of certain medical devices, on pharmaceutical manufacturers, and we do feel sorry for them. They've had it tough for a long time, haven't they?
Tragic.
Medicare payroll taxes increased 0.9 percentage points for people with incomes over $200,000 or $250,000 for couples filing jointly. So really, essentially, Mitt Romney's argument that it's a tax would have to be, it's not when I do it, it is when you do it. But as of this week, it's no longer Romney's argument.
Right.
Well,
correct?
I mean, their campaign has essentially come out and said it is a penalty. But I mean, what the Roberts decision did was what I don't think anybody could have done is unite Tea Party and that whole conservative bastion behind Mitt Romney. I mean, the fundraising that he's been able to generate.
But it's hypocrisy.
But I think what's interesting about this.
Today?
I don't think he blew it. I mean, I think they've been put in a good position where they can argue what they're going to do. I don't think it's going to be the defining issue of 2012. But I will say one of the interesting things I thought about that opinion was the whole Medicaid expansion.
Yes.
And I think it will be interesting to see as these states decide to
all
opt
gonna
out.
take it.
My thing is,
If that
I
raises
would really like to see the argument instead of it being such a heavy-duty political argument when it comes to the vernacular and the language and the law and the Constitution, is how it might affect Americans daily.
Well,
how the possibilities of how this would affect Americans daily,
and
as
the
in
president,
healthcare.
And the president hasn't made that case effectively enough.
I know,
Now,
and that's what I would like to see, the more of that, because, to a certain extent, I'm not saying any of this is a smokescreen. It's very valid. The whole argument is valid. The controversy is valid. The back and forth is valid, absolutely. But Americans want to know, individuals, families, want to know how it's going to affect them as far as their health care is concerned.
Well, the notion that it's the largest tax increase in history is a lie. It was a pants-on-fire lie on PolitiFact.
It's
really
insane.
It's completely insane. And it's, again, in
It's even
Massachusetts.
an overreach for the Republicans.
Yeah, and in Massachusetts, it affected, again, less than 1% of households. Now, I do think that Governor Romney's in a bit of a position that John Kerry was in 2004. Your number one wedge issue you, but you don't got the wedge. In 2004, it was Iraq, which Kerry voted for. Now it's the Affordable Care Act, which is really Romney Care. He did it first. It's the most successful thing he did as governor of Massachusetts, and he has to run away from it. I think the governor would be much better served to stand his ground, say, look, man, yeah, I did it, but I believe in states' rights, not imposing it on the entire. No, if he takes the states' rights argument, he'll speak to the base and say, we did it there, you shouldn't make it national,
I agree,
and
but I think
own
He
it.
could have done it. He could have done that. I agree with you.
I
What do you
think
think?
he needs to stick with the jobs and economy.
Yeah, he's got to
message
stay away
because
from it.
I mean,
Is that why Eric Fernstrom, my old buddy, full disclosure, I was the guy on CNN who asked Eric Fernstrom the question that led to the Etch-a-Sketch controversy.
Really?
So that was me. So I go back with this guy,
Nice.
and now you've got a lot of Republicans calling for Mr. Fernstrom's head,
bad.
including Mr. Murdoch, who said Mitt's got to fire all of his people. But he's the one who came out and said that it's not
it's not
a
a
tax.
penalty.
Yes, he did.
And
No,
again,
he said it's not a tax.
it's not a tax, exactly. It's a penalty.
But nobody did agree. What he specifically did, you're right. He never said that word, except that when Chuck Todd said, "Well, is it a fine? Is it a penalty?" He went, "Yeah."
And every time Eric Fernstrom tells the truth, Republicans go
Yeah,
nuts.
they go nuts.
So,
and I am interested to see though, because with this whole Medicaid thing, I think a lot of states are going to opt out, and I think you're going to see
I
a
think they
massive
will.
Not
people.
gonna happen.
I think
Yeah, I
they
don't
will.
think they will.
Can I
You
tell
might see
why?
a massive
Can I
people
tell you
enter the
why?
market, which
I'm going to tell you why. Here's the reason. Look, there's certainly Republican governors are going to make the noises they're making. But you know what the deal is? 3 years, the federal government pays 100% of it. 2 years past that,
They do
95%. For the rest of time, 90%. Now, if you opt out of it, what you're basically doing is taking the federal taxes your people are paying in your state, and it's going to the state next door. That's not good politics. People are going to notice, well, wait a second, why am I paying and everybody else is getting it? So they can rattle their sabers all they want. They're going to lose elections if they don't opt into it.
unless they can kill it before it starts helping people.
That's different.
And that's
They
the
could
whole
kill it
challenge.
first.
If
That
they can
could
kill it
happen.
before it
Which
helps
could
anyone.
happen.
Now, I think when Mitt Romney said this is going to be $500 billion a year, is that a number he pulled out of his magic underwear?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, in terms
Who
of saying,
knows for sure?
well, he said it was going to be $500 billion in Medicare
And
cuts.
that's a fear-mongering theory.
Yeah.
Exactly, because correct me if I'm wrong.
There
You're the
are
expert.
500 million in
500
Medicare
billion,
cuts.
but it's not.
Or billion.
It's in cuts to potential
It's
future
savings.
spending
It's not-
over the next 10 years.
Not one benefit was ever taken away in this law.
Nope.
I mean, not even a fraction
They
of a benefit.
shaved away money that was expected to be
Exactly.
added to the Medicare benefits.
Yes.
The Medicare benefits
And they
over the
found
next
ways
10
to make
years.
it more efficient. That hopefully will work.
I want this to work, but I just think that I don't know. I'm very skeptical that this is actually going to save money. You had a CMS study saying this is going to add what 478 billion.
But reduce the deficit.
But
120 billion. reducing
again,
the
we don't know what's going to happen. But
You're right, we
I'm
don't
very
know.
skeptical that this is actually going
And
to bring rates down.
I agree with you, because I would have supported the same kind of socialist healthcare enjoyed by all, and I mean all of our capitalist allies, single payer.
But this
Medicare
is-
for all,
this is
which the
on the
president,
way.
by the way, this president could have signed a one-page executive order authorizing Medicare for all, and we would have single payer
No,
like
he
all of our
couldn't have.
allies.
He
do.
really couldn't have.
Well, he wouldn't be reelected.
Well, he couldn't have done it. I can give you 1,000 reasons why it wouldn't have worked.
Can Mitt Romney ever have this repealed on day one? I know he really
No.
wants to bring back pre-existing
No, I
conditions, but
don't.
how is Mitt Romney ever going to get 60 votes in the Senate?
Even if he wants to, I don't think
The re-
it's
the re-
possible.
you know, and the big pitch out today is that if the Republicans take the Senate back, they can do it on reconciliation with 51 votes. Even that's not true. What they can do, and what they're pitching is, we can basically kill the tax. Therefore, the bill becomes unconstitutional.
Right.
But if they were to kill the tax, what they can't do with just 51 votes is kill pre-existing insurance companies having to cover
things
it.
people like.
So what they're going to, it's worse than that, because what they'd be doing is saying to the insurance companies, we've just taken away the mandate. So people don't have to buy, but guess what? You still have to sell insurance to everybody who's sick.
Right? Yeah.
That's gonna. It's not financially.
Can't be done.
tenable, yeah.
We're going to move on to the next topic, but Lee Doren, I thank you again for submitting the video. I want to say that, I'm a fan. If I ever meet you, I'd love to buy you a drink, and it's great to live in a country, or a world rather, where Reaganomics worked and George W. Bush's presidency never happened. It's the long, hard, ugly story of Obamacare versus Republican can't care less. We want to know what you think, however, and you mentioned the reconciliation vote. That's another area we can criticize the president, because what did they say? We can't have a public option because that would require reconciliation, and
That's
we
a
won't do that.
long discussion.
And then what did they do? They went and passed the Republican plan using reconciliation,
Yeah.
so we can make fun of both sides on this one. But we want to know what you think. Please give us your comments. Be as angry as possible, because that's classy. Girls like it.